In part 2 of our Homewood Cemetery series, we continue to explore Section 14, which is the final resting place of some of Pittsburgh's most elite. William Harry Brown, born in 1856, was a high-level mason, banker, coal magnate, and heir to a shipping empire. Brownsville, Pennsylvania is his namesake. He died in 1921. Behind every great man is an even greater woman. Margaret Boyle Brown helped French orphans during World War I and was decorated by the Chancellor of the Legion of Honor. In 1930, she was even made an officer of the Legion. She was instrumental in organizing and systemizing the Red Cross in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. After her husband's death, she lived in London as an expatriate and was even presented to court in 1924. Margaret was rumored to have introduced Edward, Prince of Wales, to Wallace Simpson, whom he would later abdicate the throne for and wed. Mrs. Brown would return to Pittsburgh in the late 1930s, where she remained until her death in 1938. The mausoleum was designed by famed architects of the day, Alden and Harlow. Their buildings were plentiful in Pittsburgh and Cambridge, Massachusetts. The mausoleum was erected in 1905 and was inspired by the Browns' love of all things Egyptian. When built, it had a much more rustic look. The original pyramid had rough sides, giving the appearance of uncut stone. Mr. Brown later changed his mind about the look and had the sides sanded to be smooth. The mausoleum stands 35 feet high and is the most photographed in Homewood Cemetery. The structure holds the remains of Mr. and Mrs. Brown, their 3 children, and 1 son-in-law. Mary Flinn Lawrence was born February 20, 1887, to a prominent family in Pittsburgh. Her father was a wealthy businessman and Pennsylvania senator known as Boss Flinn. Mary was always described as bright and charming. Her father insisted all his children be well educated despite gender. She attended private schools and obtained a college degree. At an early age, she saw an opportunity for change. She became involved in politics, influenced by her father's more than 30 years of public service. In 1912, she became president of a suffragist organization. During World War I, she helped organize the Suffrage Red Cross, which focused on the war efforts. She was a huge proponent of women's rights as well. She is quoted as saying, "It is a shame and disgrace that a woman, because of sex alone, today may do the same work and better work sometimes and still be paid less wages than a man." When not fighting for women's rights, she was a well-known equestrian. Mary did a lot of charity work and did much for the industrial home for crippled children. She married Major John Lawrence in 1914, and the two purchased 629 acres in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. They adopted and raised their 2 boys on this estate. In 1959, Mary was injured in an automobile accident, leaving her crippled. She made an agreement with the Allegheny County Park System and sold the property to them for $1. The arrangement allowed her to stay in her home until her death in 1974. At that time, the land, house, and stables were turned over to the county to be used as a public park. Today, the estate is known as Heartwood Acres and open to all. Mary also was quoted as saying, "No one group has a right to the landscape. It belongs to all. If we preserve and promote natural beauty, we are doing something of great value for posterity." Mary is buried in a large mausoleum in Homewood Cemetery, along with her parents, her husband, and 1 sibling. We continue our tour of Homewood Cemetery's Section 14 by visiting the Heinz family mausoleum. Henry John Heinz was born to German immigrants on October 11, 1844, in Pittsburgh. At the age of 14, he began selling the vegetables that he had grown in his mother's garden. From there, he moved on to selling prepared horseradish in clear bottles. This was to show that the product had not been altered. Many products of the day were sold in dark-colored containers, so the contents were not visible to the consumer. He was the founder of the H.J. Heinz Company, which grew into one of the largest food processors in America. In 1875, a financial panic caused the company to go bankrupt. Heinz managed to reorganize and pay off his debts. He then launched the F&J Heinz Company with his brother John and cousin Frederick. In 1888, he bought out his partners and began construction of a factory along the banks of the Allegheny River. In 1896, the famous slogan, 57 varieties, was introduced. Henry was inspired by an ad he saw for a company offering 21 varieties of shoes. He chose 57 because he considered the number to be lucky. Oddly enough, at the time, H.J. Heinz was manufacturing over 60 products. Henry was known to be a kind and fair employer and a pioneer in labor relations. Many manufacturing magnates of the time would tour his factories to see what they could do better. Workers were treated well and afforded comforts such as showers, manicures, and free medical care. He offered recreation facilities such as gyms, swimming pools, and gardens. He treated employees and their families to picnics, free concerts, and gave them access to libraries. In 1906, he was instrumental in the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act. Prior to this, there were no regulations on foods sold to consumers. On May 14, 1919, Henry succumbed to pneumonia at the age of 74. Today, H.J. Heinz Corporation is best known for its ketchup. Don't even utter the word Heinz in Pittsburgh. H.J. Heinz' great-grandson, John Heinz III, was born into the Heinz food manufacturing family on October 23, 1938. He attended Harvard and Yale and afterwards went into the family business. He later became a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. He had political aspirations and became a U.S. Senator in 1977. On April 4, 1991, Heinz was traveling over Pennsylvania in a small plane. There was an issue with the Piper Aerostar. A helicopter was sent into the air to investigate. Due to an error made by the helicopter pilot, the airplane pilot, or both, a collision occurred, sending both aircraft to the ground over an elementary school. All passengers were killed, including 2 elementary school children that were on the ground. John Heinz III has a history center named after him in Pittsburgh, which is an affiliate of the Smithsonian Institute and the largest history museum in Pennsylvania. The Heinz Mausoleum holds quite a few members of the Heinz family. The above-ground structure is small. Much of the family is buried in a spacious vault under the mosaic tiled floor, which has a trapdoor-style opening which allows it to be opened for internments. As they say, you can't take it with you, but you can leave an interesting story behind. Homewood Cemetery is the final resting place of the famous, infamous, and citizens from all walks of life. We will be visiting again soon on The Life of the Dead.